Sophie Lamb should have never said yes. Now she would have to stand here and watch someone get killed riding one of her horses. The sunrise soared over the roofs of the staged western town and glistened on the camera screens, which failed to catch the scent of ash in the air or the 2-week-old wildfire smoke still swelling behind them. Unlike the hushed crowd around her, Sophie wasn't there to get a peek at Hollywood's latest stars reshooting a scene. She was there mainly for Thunderbolt, her most cantankerous black stallion. The one she'd, for sure, advised the director not to use. And action! At the director's command, Sophie curled her toes in the pointed ends of her dusty cowboy boots. Come on, boy. Just one good take. Thunderbolt's rider, the recently upgraded extra named Jonah, leaned forward in his saddle. Holding on to his Stetson with one hand and the reins in the other, he had Thunderbolt galloping in hot. Too hot. A trail of dust paraded behind as Thunderbolt's hooves pounded the dry ground. The clouded air tickled Sophie's throat, but she dared not make a sound to ruin the take. They flew past the trading post, then the church. Another few heartbeats, and they'd reached their mark beside 2 of her other horses, tied to a wooden post out in front of the set's bank. Sophie squeezed past one of the production assistants sipping coffee and zeroed in on Thunderbolt's movements. His front leg had healed quicker than Sophie's weak ankle, but he still needed slow and steady, just as they'd practiced a million times before everything blew up on the set the 2 weeks before. Literally. But Thunderbolt's ears weren't pulled back. He wasn't groaning, wasn't limping. Sophie slowed her own gait and slipped in behind one of the assistant directors in the front row of the crowd. Maybe this speed-impaired rider would work, for one take. Jonah yanked back on the reins, hard. Thunderbolt stopped 10 feet from the desired mark. Dust swirled and went straight for the other actors, making Catherine Canary, the lead actress, cough. Cut! Cosmos Ferguson, the director, stomped toward the filming scene. Jonah, didn't I tell you to pull up closer to the other horses? This should have taken one take. Jonah dropped the reins onto his lap and lifted his hands. You think this stupid thing listens to me? Sophie scowled. Great. She'd been assured Jonah was an experienced rider. Thunderbolt snorted and lifted his right front leg. Sophie pushed back her shoulders and marched across the boundary line toward Jonah. However, Cosmos intercepted her. Problem? In front of Sophie, Jonah fanned his face with his stiff Stetson as he laughed loudly into his cell phone. Thunderbolt's left ear twitched. Sophie nodded her head in the direction of Thunderbolt and Jonah. That pairing is never going to work. However, I think Jonah could ride Pudding or even Chestnut, Goldie too if... Cosmos held up his palm. Jonah's character must be on the darkest horse. The animal he rides is more than his transportation. It's the outer expression of the story's mood at this point of the movie. No character's mood was worth Thunderbolt getting hurt. Or worse. He'd already been through enough trauma before she'd rescued him. All her horses had in one way or another deserved a better life. Right, I understand that, except... From on top of Thunderbolt, Jonah moved his arm through the air to something he said over his phone, and his hat flew out of his grip. The Stetson twisted into the air and dropped, but gravity didn't allow it to simply land on the ground. That would have been too easy. Instead, he smacked against Thunderbolt's lifted leg. He released a neigh. He reared back, eyes wide and ears flat. Not again. Sophie raised her hands. Whoa, Thunderbolt, easy. But the only easy thing about the morning so far had been arriving on time.